Trade breakthrough between the U.S. and China. Negotiators agreeing to temporarily suspend most of the tariffs on each other's goods. Join us now, Mick Mulvaney, co-chair of ACTM, a former OMB director and former White House chief of staff under President Trump, and Heidi Heitkamp, a former North Dakota senator and director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics. We don't know the entire sequence of what this means, I don't think, Heidi, and what happens over the next 90 days. But what was your reaction when you heard the news over the weekend?
I think it's really good news. It's good news for the economy. And I think President Trump put an adult in the room and he was able to go there. But let's not kid ourselves. This is detente. And I listened to your earlier interview, Joe, with the secretary who talked about non-tariff barriers. And those will be very, very difficult to negotiate. And so I think this is a good first step. I think that it is an unforced error. We didn't need to take this step. I think if he had such a good relationship, he could have done this without threatening the livelihood of a lot of American small businesses. But this is really good news, and we should take it that way.
But they're tough, and you look at IP theft and fentanyl and all those things. I know it's nice to smile and say, gosh, be nice to us, President Xi, but they're ruthless, Heidi. I mean, you don't have to, it doesn't take a genius to see that sometimes you got to play hardball.
Well, Joe, I think that this didn't need to happen, and Liberation Day is I think in the rearview mirror. One thing I would say is 90 days. Everything's in 90 days. How is he going to negotiate all these deals? And this is very complicated work. You know it, and I know it, and so we'll see what happens. But I think we should all take a sigh of relief that. This is, we have detente. We'll see what the deal looks like when it's done.
Mick, did it need to be done? I mean, nobody else has done it to this point. Was China a serious problem for us?
Oh, absolutely, they're a serious problem. And I do think it needed to be done. I think Trump needed to send the message that he was deadly serious. But if you're looking for good news, I think the good news is now we've sort of put to rest the ultimate question. When Liberation Day got announced, in fact, I think we talked about this on the show, were tariffs there for the purposes of staying there forever and for the purposes of rebuilding the manufacturing base in the U.S.? Are we going to be making textiles and shoes in this country again? Or were tariffs there for the purpose of leverage for negotiating deals? And I think now we pretty much know what the answer to that question is. You see it with the UK. You're seeing it today with China. This is leverage. Donald Trump is one of the best I've ever seen at making leverage out of nothing. I do think it's necessary. I think Heidi's absolutely right, though. We are nowhere near having a deal. I think when we cut a deal with the Chinese back in 2018, it took us 18 months. The UK deal, I think, is still just a term sheet, so we're several months away there. So I count this, as Heidi mentioned, progress in the right direction, but certainly far from final success.
Mick, if you were still budget director, how would you be answering questions about this big, beautiful bill? And if we extend 2017 and add all those other tax breaks, what would you say about the budgetary implications? Would you say we'll do right to things with Medicaid and SNAP and things like that? How would you say it's all going to be growth from deregulation? How would you sell it to make it more palatable to deficit hawks?
If I'm the OMB director, the answer might be different than if I'm still a member of Congress. The OMB director works for the president, so I'll be out there saying exactly what the administration is saying, which is that we need this for growth. If we don't do anything, it's the largest tax increase in history. What does that do to the economy, Joe? I know you know the answer to that question. It's mostly rhetorical on this network, but it's a huge tax increase. We know what that does to the economy. That would be my push as the OMB director. As a former member of Congress and one of the last remaining fiscal conservatives, I guess, in Washington, D.C., I'd be having a heart attack over what it does to the deficit. I want to know where the real cost savings are. And are they real or are they sort of imaginary? Well, there's all sorts of different ways to say you're cutting spending in Washington when you're not really. So we've got the preliminary data out, or at least the preliminary proposal over the weekend. We're a long way yet from seeing what the real impact is. And my fear is at the end of the day, it will be easier for folks in Washington to raise taxes than it will be to cut spending.
Heidi, we had a different guest that I was prepared for earlier, but and then we got you to come along. But I'm going to see if you have the, a lot of times.
I'm your second choice, Joe.
No, you're always our first choice. But I'm just going to see whether you have the same talking points. He was going to say that this is another example of Donald Trump cutting taxes for his billionaire friends and for the rich corporations, and that nobody else benefits. Is that in your notes?
No, that wouldn't be in my notes. I think it's Steve Scalise who put the damper on Trump's idea that we should tax millionaires at a higher rate. I thought it was interesting. I think when you look at Donald Trump, what he's been talking about is no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. What about Social Security? He's backed off that because that has dire effects on the Social Security Trust Fund. And now he's talking about taxing millionaires. You know, the one thing about Donald Trump is he can read the room. And his room is working class folks. And when this comes out and they cut Medicaid and they cut SNAP benefits and there is no benefit to, the message is that millionaires still get their tax deal. And I watched as Andrew had a very sharp and pointed discussion with Scalise about carried interest.
Well,
and
Trump wants to do that.
I would not say.
That's not Trump high. Trump wanted to do the carried interest.
I get it. But my point is that Donald Trump knows that when this package comes out, if it comes out the way the House is moving, that this is not this is a package that will get talked a lot about by Democrats because it's a package that is going to richly benefit rich people. And I think Donald Trump understands that. So I would say it's not Trump. I'd say it's the House.
There's been op-eds written, and by the Wall Street Journal, I admit, saying that Trump and the Republicans will be hesitant to do anything with Medicaid because you'll hear from Democrats that they'll demagogue it and say you're cutting Medicaid and pushing grandma off the cliff again. Mick, isn't there a way to do things with Medicaid where it doesn't benefit working age, perfectly healthy men that I think Scalise said 35-year-olds living in their parents' basement playing video games and not pregnant women and disabled people? It's a mess right now. Can't you do it in a surgical way that actually improves Medicaid and saves money?
Not only can you do it, Joe, we did it back in 2017 in that budget. People forget Donald Trump's budget in 2017, which I helped write, was the largest reduction in mandatory spending in history. And it did not touch 65 and over Medicare, did not touch most of Medicaid, did not touch old age retirement within Social Security. It cut all the other programs that have been funded out of those giant pools of money for the last 30, 40, 50 years. Face it, when there's a giant pool of money in Washington, and Heidi knows this as well as anybody, people go there to get that money. And that's what's happened to Medicare and Medicaid, which is why they're so out of control. You can do a lot of work here and get a lot of real savings in entitlement mandatory programs without touching the things that people associate with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And Trump did it in 2017.
They say we got to go, Heidi. You want to yell at Mick or something?
No, I totally agree. But I also think that if you did it, you did it once. And let me tell you, I think that the Democrats would be wise to agree to some form of work requirements. But by the same token, waste, fraud, and abuse, let's see it. The AGs were already supposed to be investigating it. So we'll live to fight this another day, I think, on the Medicaid issue.